Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. Got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. We have some quarterback stat projections to bring you tonight. We are super excited to get to Jeff's data, as always, here on Thursday night. Jeff, a lot of data from you lately. Are going to be taking a break here in a couple weeks, or next week, and then the week after that. So people will have to go without their data for a couple weeks, but I think we got a real banger here before we take a break for a couple weeks.
Yeah, this is good stuff because we're going to project the main stats people are used to seeing: completion percent, TDs, INTs, all that kind of stuff that leads to winning. But we're also going to use, pro football focus NFL like rating to rank the projected 18 starters 1 through 18. So we're going to do that incrementally here. And definitely all things on the Big Ten Huddle and in my podcast, which is Big Jeff's Insights on Thursday nights, where we will have data for all the teams, right? We're just not covering the blue bloods. We cover everyone. So
Cover every
good
team
stuff.
here on the Big Ten Huddle. As always, you can always count on that. However, tonight we are going to give some special treatment to those of you who are in the chat here. And you don't have to be in the chat talking the entire time, but at some point we are going to ask you to name your favorite team, and the teams that are named first in that order, those will be the quarterbacks that we talk about first. So if there's no Rutgers fans in the chat, we won't talk about Rutgers first. Philip is already in the chat, so I think Philip will definitely get us there with the Illini. We also got Trojan Fight. What's up, JR? Appreciate you being here. And Sun Taurus, there
Taurus.
we go. Taurus 9, Sun Taurus. Appreciate you being here, Sun. Sun, I don't know if I know who your favorite team is. Put that in the chat for us, Sun. And then Meadows, Ohio State baby, of course, got our Buckeyes in the chat as well. Uh, Trojan Fight says, I don't know what to do with Zach not here to crap on USC. Zach gets a lot of crap for crapping on teams, and it's one of my favorite bits on the show. Jeff would never crap on a team, right, Jeff?
I try to be positive on everyone, but realistic.
But
So
realistic. That's the key. That's the key. And Philip, as always, making sure Zach suspended indefinitely. Poor Zach. But he'll be back. He'll be back June 1st with you guys. So there we go. Okay, son, love it. Says family in the house. That's Illinois.
Illinois, nice.
There we go. We
Yeah.
got Illinois fans are good to us. We got Ohio State fans, Illinois fans, Indiana fans, Trojan Fight. Got a good number of USC fans as well. Penn State fans. Yeah, we got a lot of really good fans watching the Big Ten Huddle. We appreciate y'all. Minnesota fans, can't forget Dave and Mike and all those guys too. Kinetic and those Michigan fans as well. We appreciate you guys. So let's see. Mish says I could see Malik Washington with over 3K yards from Maryland, throwing it being down big so much. That's an important factor. That's an important factor. Jeff, before
Uh,
we get started, do you want to talk about the factors or just talk about, how you came up with these projections a little bit before we get
yeah.
into it?
Yeah. I think I should. And one thing I want to mention about Maryland, who's going to start for sure? Because that was one team that I was like, I looked up, like seeing the most recent, and there's still great debate. Some think that former UCLA quarterback is going to start over Washington. So we've got a couple teams like that made this exercise a little bit tough for Maryland for sure. But yeah, so just so you all know, so we're really ranking the quarterbacks' passing statistics tonight and their passing ratings. So that is I don't want to call it a weakness, but this is not an overall ranking of quarterbacks because it's passing focused statistics. It doesn't include the running statistics they generate. And as we all know, with multidimensional quarterbacks nowadays, if we were truly ranking quarterbacks, we'd have to factor in the running stats. So this is just who are the best passing quarterback based on NFL ratings for quarterbacks. So I'm using what Pro Football Focus uses, which is the NFL formula, if you will, and they use that for college quarterbacks. So, in just so you know, the four main emphasis that goes into that calculation is one, completion percentage, 2, yards per attempt, passing yards per attempt, that is. 3, touchdowns per passing attempt. And 4, interceptions per attempt. All that really gets into the efficiency of quarterbacks and everything. When I share the data with you, though, I'm not going to show like interceptions per attempt because that data it's hard to distinguish. I'm going to show more like percent completion percentage, total yards, total TDs, INTs, things we can relate to a little bit more statistically, even though those other 4 factors are what goes into that NFL formula. So I'm sure we'll have some people jumping on later and, in thinking, is this a rating of quarterbacks in general? But, because it doesn't include running, someone like Washington's Damon Williams Jr. will probably be undersold with this statistic, right? You're more, even a Drew Aller, who I was impressed with his running ability. It's not going to factor that in here. Fernando Mendoza, I haven't seen him play a lot, but for Indiana, Bryce Underwood is athletic, right? And he might run a lot. Aiden Childs. So again, it's not going to be factor into the rating their running ability. And so one of the first things we wanted to do, though, before getting into the projections for next year, let's take a step back and look at first who were the top 5 in the Big Ten last year. I think that's pretty interesting in a way to give you a baseline here. So these are the top 5 in order, ranked based on the NFL passer rating, which you can see in the far right column. So number 1 might be a surprise to people, but Indiana's Curtis Rourke was the number 1 rated passer in the Big Ten based on the passer rating, the NFL passer rating. So you can see 122.5. He had a pretty insane 29 to 5 TD to interception ratio. I mean, that's just super efficient. And then about a 69% completion rate. Will Howard, 118.5. Super efficient in passing. In fact, he and the number 3, Dylan Gabriel, had the exact same percentage completion rate, which is 73%. That is insanely high. I mean, that is super efficient passing for sure. And Gabriel has a lower ranking just because Howard had more bigger plays, right? Gabriel definitely had shorter passes in general, which led to that high percentage rate. But that's why Howard was higher. And then 4 and 5 are returning starters next year, right? Number 4, Drew Aller, a 111.7. He had an 18 to 5 TD to INT ratio and a very efficient 71% completion. And then interestingly, Altmaier, as good as he was 21 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. That's awesome. He only was 60% in completion percentage, right? So that one is the reason why he's under 100. He was 99.8. But again, that was still good for 5th best in the Big Ten last year. So wanted to kind of share that as kind of a baseline again for the stats we're going to show later.
Yeah, I was gonna point out.
Yep.
You mentioned the more passing attempts for Dylan Gabriel, and that adds to it. Will Howard had 3 more interceptions thrown. Will Howard struggled with interceptions at points last year. Not so much in the playoffs. Fixed that pretty well there. So that was important for him. But in the regular season, he really struggled with throwing interceptions. But it was the touchdowns overall that eventually led Will Howard to that mark that put him over the top with Dylan Gabriel. Are those the 2 players with the most passing touchdowns in the Big Ten last year? Curtis Rourke and Will Howard, only with
They
21.
were, yeah, they were the 2 highest. Really impressive. And
Mm-hmm.
just in doing my research, I looked at CJ Stroud's year just to show how insane his year was in 2021. He had 38 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. That was his first year starting at Ohio State. Just insane numbers for him.
They
Uh,
basically didn't have a running game, so they pretty much
yeah,
did just let CJ Stroud kind of do it all. It's like, okay, CJ, go
yeah,
for it.
yeah. So, but
And
29 is really, really strong for sure.
mhm.
Obviously, Drew out, as good as he was, 18 is quite low, but they leaned on that running game a lot.
For sure. For sure. All right. Let's go ahead and Mish says, I will take 18 TDs from Drew with JR lining up at wide receiver for us. Hey, I could run some routes out there. I could run some routes. Maybe not very well, but
Yeah, you got to hang
uh,
in to find out. But I guarantee I have that going up. You'll just have to see later how many more TDs he has. But it's definitely should be going up.
Yep. John says looks like Indiana has the best QB again this year. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. It's going to
We'll
be a
have to
really
see.
good year for quarterbacks. And again, this doesn't factor in rushing and stuff like that, which is obviously stats that need to be considered as well. I'm not trying to downplay Curtis Rourke. I love the year that Curtis Rourke had, but this is purely just throwing the ball. But yeah, Curtis Rourke definitely one of the best, if not the best, quarterbacks in the Big Ten last year. I wouldn't argue very much if you told me he was the best last year. All right, let's see. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next two tables. So Jeff and I are going to talk about these two tables, and then after that, we'll get to the quarterbacks for next year. So if you can put your team that you root for in the chat, then the number or the order in which you all put those teams in the chat, that's the order we will go through to address each quarterback after these two tables. So we'll talk about these two tables. You all put your teams in the chat, and then we'll get to it after that. Jeff, go ahead, take it.
Yeah, just the table 2, which is the one above there. So this is Big Ten returning quarterback rankings, but this one includes new quarterbacks to the Big Ten that are returning to college. So this is where you get number 2 behind Drew Aller as far as passer rating was Mark Gronowski, the new quarterback for Iowa who came from South Dakota State. He had a 100.5. Now, granted, lesser competition. We acknowledge that. But just from a pure stats perspective, he would be the number 2 technically returning quarterback from a ranking perspective. And then our buddy Nico Iamaleava, I think I got that name right. It's hard to say.
Iamaleava.
Iamaleava. Okay,
Yep.
Iamaleava. Third, 100.3. I mean, 19 TDs, 5 interceptions. I know he's gotten a lot of flack for how good is this guy, everything. He had good numbers for Tennessee. I mean, that was his first year starting too, right? And you see numbers jump significantly usually from the first year starting to the second year. Then Altmaier would be fourth, and then our Indiana caller mentioned Fernando Mendoza coming from California to Indiana. He would be the 5th highest returning quarterback based on a 95.8. And then you got Jaden Maiava, and then you could just see down the line here Billy Edwards, Dylan Raiola. I tried to also put this in colors for the team to match the colors, relatively speaking. For Penn State, it's a white out, so they're the only one with a white background. But most of your red teams have red backgrounds. Ohio State will have like a gray background. If you go to the bottom there's a bunch of quarterbacks too that had ratings, but this is for fewer than 100 passing attempts. So really, any passer rating there, a big grain of salt. Lindsey for Minnesota had 4 attempts, so you can kind of throw those numbers out. Damon Williams, though, 73 pass attempts. He actually, got some play there in during the season. 160
That bowl game
passer
helped
rating.
him out a lot. He was fantastic in that bowl game against Louisville.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So to make sure this was apples to apples and we don't get numbers that just go off the charts, these figures are only for the regular season. So everything you're seeing is going to be regular season. And then that way, when Ohio State makes a run, all the numbers they piled up in the postseason, and even for Penn State as well, they got 3 extra games. I'm keeping it to the regular season so that we have a better apples to apples comparison. So, he did, to your point, JR, he did real well in that bowl game, but he was doing well in his spot duty for, what's his name? Will
Rogers.
Will Rogers. And he played well. So that really bodes well for him, but he's still going to, I must say, his stats are going to look better than they would if he was a full-time starter, because they're able to put packages in for him and kind of bring him in at the right times And I think that is going to make his stats look better than they would if he was a full-time starter that year, being such a young quarterback, if that makes sense. But this is what the returning start or the returning projected starters for this year looked like for last year's stats. And I thought that'd be interesting to share. Anything
For sure.
here? Yep.
I was gonna pull up Ryan Brownie really fast because he transferred back to Purdue. That was one of those ones that you know
Yeah,
I forgot about. So
I
I'm
actually
gonna
do
look
have
that
him
one up
when we.
really. Oh, you do have
Yeah,
him. What's his stuff?
I have him. He had a 84.9 rating, QB rating, so that's pretty low. I mean, he had only 76 passes in general, 4 TDs, 2 interceptions. So really, not a lot of data to work with there. I definitely don't like to overreact to really low pass attempt type numbers.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he probably would have been on that bottom section. He probably had what 100. Yeah, he had fewer than 100 pass attempts, so he would have been
Who
down there with those other
who is
guys. Yeah,
that?
it'll be Ryan Brownie.
Yeah. He was the one
Yeah.
who had um let's see. Yeah, 76 pass attempts only.
Yeah. All right, a few comments really fast, and then we will get to the quarterbacks. Trojan Fight says, I mean Riley has a great track record with QBs too. Doesn't mean Maava will be a top QB. Doesn't mean he will, but it gives him a darn good chance to be. That's one of the reasons why I uh I don't worry too much about the quarterback position for Ohio State, even with Kyle McCord, who was pretty much the worst quarterback in the Ryan Day era at Ohio State. He still threw the ball all over the place and racked up a ton of yards and touchdowns and everything like that. So, I mean, and Jada Maava, I tell you, I mean, Jeff, I don't know what you thought of him at the end of last year, but I liked what I saw out of Jada Maava. A lot of people give him crap. Now, he did turn the ball over too many times, but he also, got thrown into a system kind of unexpectedly with Bench and Miller Moss and everything like that. I feel pretty good about Maava going into next season. What do you think?
Yeah, we'll cover that when we get to him. But just, I agree. Liked what I saw. Too loose with the ball, but that's something that you can get better at, right? You can't teach arm strength, but you can hopefully teach um, some better decision making. But some quarterbacks just naturally are quicker thinkers and quicker decision makers, right? So that's why it's so hard to project quarterbacks. It's like they have to process so much information and do it like extremely quickly to make good decisions, and to project that is just difficult to do, whether you're NFL or a college recruiter.
For sure, for sure. And Meadows brings up the other part that I was thinking about. Just tons of wide receiver talent, and the Max Clare addition for Ohio State is also something that I think some people are underrating. To have a reliable tight end out there for him, I think is huge. All right,
That brings up a good point. I mean, these stats here are a reflection of the quarterback and their skill set, but it's also reflective of the systems they're part of in their supporting cast. So you could take whoever and put them in Ohio State, and their numbers would be way better than they would with whoever they were playing with before. It doesn't mean they would have the same year that Will Howard would have necessarily, but their stats would be significantly improved from whatever school they're at. So definitely a good insight there.
definitely, definitely. Okay. Reminder: if you want, even if it's not your favorite team, go ahead. If you want to see a certain team in order, for right now we've got four teams, and I've got two other fans I know highlighted of different teams that we'll bring up. Alex, I saw your comment about Damon Williams, so we'll bring that up when we get there. But yeah, if there's any other teams you guys want to see in any order, let me know, and we'll kind of bring them up one at a time. So the very first comment we got. No surprise here. It's Philip, Illinois. Let's do Illinois first. How about that?
To
Uh,
Illinois.
there you go, Jeff.
All right. So Illinois, basically, Luke Altmaier, that far left column there, number 4. So I'm projecting him being the 4th best passer in the Big Ten based on his NFL passer rating. So and here's the assumptions for a lot of these quarterbacks. I kind of like for a quarterback to say, here's who I think maybe the best comp is to like help calculate. So the comp is himself in 2024. Just important to know they have 18 of 21 starters back from who they played in their bowl game against South Carolina. So that's huge. What is interesting about Altmaier, though, his completion percentage, as we saw earlier, was only a little over 60% last year. His prior year, it was almost 65%. So I'm actually having Altmaier, this is a key thing, I'm having his completion percentage return back to what it was 2 years ago, to improve by 5 percentage points up to 65%. I think that's a big deal. The other thing that's interesting is he had 22 passing touchdowns last year. That's the most for an Illinois quarterback since 2008. And I didn't look up who that was. That might have been like Juice Williams or something. I think from back then. Also,
I think Juice Williams was 2008. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty impressed with myself. I probably should have looked that up. Also, the 2,700 passing yards he had were the most since 2015. So I have that passing yards going up a little bit to 2,800. And then his TDs increasing by 1. His INTs at 5. I think I held that steady the prior year. That's already like super low. So what you're looking at here is not necessarily a high volume guy, which is why he's not a 3,000 yard passer, but that's not who Brett Bielema is. Even though he's having an experienced QB, don't expect him to throw it all over the yard. And the other thing is we believe we're adding a wide receiver factor here, which is something I considered, and I asked JR's opinion on this. The wide receiver factor is from 1 very poor wide receiver group to 5, which is elite. The only one who got a 5 is Ohio State, and for obvious reasons, they have Jeremiah Smith. Everyone else is somewhere between 1 and 4. We think Illinois is 3, so that's very solid. So, being 4th in the Big Ten with a ranking for passing, that's good. That bodes well for Illinois' season, and I think it's pretty reasonable for the Illini. JR, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no arguments from me. I agree. I think Altmaier's completion percentage will increase. I think that Altmaier, I mean, he faced a number of difficult defenses last year, and I think the offensive line will be better this year, so he'll have more time back there to kind of pick defenses apart. If these are numbers for Altmaier next year, they're not going to be they're not going to be Heisman level numbers or anything like that, but a nearly 3,000 yard passer, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, that'll get him drafted, and that'll be a huge thing for Illinois. So
Another reason
very excited for these numbers.
Another reason I think that's reasonable, that rating of 104, it's about 5 points better than last year. That's reasonable too, right? You should see progression there. I think this one makes a lot of. I feel very comfortable.
Have a tight end back too, Cole Rusk. As long as he comes off an injury, okay, that's going to be helpful having him as well. So yeah, all right, ready to go to the next one?
Yeah.
All right, our next one comes from Mish, and he says Rutgers. So let's head on down. We'll bring up Athan Kaliakmanis. There he is, Jeff.
All right, Rutgers. So he is an interesting one. You could see he comes in 11th. So he's projected to be 11th out of 18 Big Ten starting quarterbacks. His comp is himself from last year. Here's the interesting thing with Kaliakmanis. It's kind of perplexing. His completion percentage last year for Rutgers was 54%. And you might think, oh, they had a bunch of drops and injuries, and that's not him. Well, at Minnesota, when he was a starter, it was 53%. That's terrible. 53% and 54% the last 2 years for Kaliakmanis as a starter. So it makes me say, what is going on with this guy? Is it he's just had that bad of receivers or anything? I mean, part of me says you are who you are. Now, I did bump him up due to experience to a 57 and change completion percentage, but I have a hard time believing he's going to be 60 plus based on history, right? So I think that's why he's only 11th ranked. I mean, that completion percentage impacts his yardage, which is 2,700, but you can see he's got more pass attempts than Luke Altmaier. So that's really dragging him down. I know they want to be Rutgers wants to be run based, but really, um, they've had to throw the ball maybe more than they would like. Actually, yards per completion was 12.3 in 2024. So I think I held that relatively steady. On the good side for him, last year he had, let's see, for interceptions here. I lost him where he is on the sheet here. Rutgers.
Interceptions, he had last year 7. He had how many of those were? He had 19 turnover worthy throws. That was second in the Big Ten
Okay.
to Aiden Childs.
Yeah. But he does take care of the ball well. So I had his TDs to interceptions 19, TDs to 6 interceptions. I mean, that's actually good. And we ranked his wide receiver core as kind of average in the Big Ten, as third. So I have him as 2 more TDs than last year. So he had 17 TDs. So it went up to 19. So I'm upping his figures a little bit based on his experience. But, that historical completion percentage for him just kind of scares me. And that's why he's only 11th out of 18. So I don't know if our Rutgers guy has any comments on it or what he thinks. We welcome those.
Um, no comments or anything. I'll just say for me, I think he'll probably be around 55% completion percentage again. At a certain point, it just is who you are. I mean, I think Caliac Manis, I remember watching him last year. Number one, he throws the ball away a lot, and some of that was offensive line last year. But Rutgers had a pretty good offensive line at the beginning of the season, so it wasn't anything egregious. So there's that, and then also too, he was second in the or he was third in the Big Ten in dropped passes in 2023. In 2024, he had the most dropped passes. That's with two different teams, two different wide receiver groups. I think a lot of people will say, "Oh, Rutgers, they should have a wide receiver factor of 1 or 2." I think at a certain point, it just kind of is who I think Kaliak Manis is. I mean, he can do some nice things. He's got a nice big arm, and he's a good, big kid. But at the end of the day, I mean, he has accuracy issues,
Yeah.
and if they don't have a solid running game, I don't know how efficient he'll be. So I hate to say a guy at 57% completion percentage is too high. I hope you're right, Jeff. I want him to do well, but I don't know. I might just see him closer to 55%, but that's just me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that 89 ranking is 5 points more than last year. So, I'm not
Yeah.
being conservative, I don't think. And
No,
it
no,
and he
not at
still
all.
only is 11th out of 18 with all that experience, right? He should be higher than that, frankly, with as much
Correct.
experience as he has.
Correct. All right, let's get to our next one. PSU Jim says Penn State. So let's bring up Penn State. There you go, Jeff.
So Penn State, the whiteout, they're the only one with a white background. So Drew Aller. So the main comp is Drew Aller from last year. In fact, we have 2 years to compare. He has more weapons at the wide receiver position. Everyone probably is familiar with 3 key transfers that came in. We're not going to detail and get into that granular with individual players too much, but definitely has more weapons. Did lose his tight end in Tyler Warren, but many feel he has the best offensive line in the Big Ten backing him up as well. We give his wide receiver core a 3. We need to see it first before I would give it a 4. So I agree, JR in concert on the 3 out of 5. So that's kind of average. He actually went down in pass attempts. 2 years ago, he had 352 attempts and he's down to 307. I'm actually keeping the pass attempts then similar to last year just because some think Penn State has the best running back duel in the country, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, right? So as good as it is having an experienced quarterback, I think that running game and the fact that Penn State, as good as they are, they should be ahead a lot, right? So they're going to run a run clock and throw strategically. So I think similar 307, a little over 300 pass attempts. Completion percentage, it had gone from 2 years ago, it was 60.8%. Last year, it was 71%. So he raised his completion percentage by about 10 percentage points. That was huge. I have a hard time believing that's going to increase much more, so I've just rounded it up to 71%. That's still excellent. And then last year he had 18 TDs and 5 interceptions. So I'm ratcheting the TDs up by 5 with that better wide receiver core, and then he's going to throw one more interception. That's still really low. If you're throwing 5 or 6, extremely low. So all that adds up to a 119, almost 120 NFL passer rating. I do have Drew Aller as the number 1 rated passing quarterback in the Big Ten. And if that happens, it bodes well for Penn State's chances to win the Big Ten and do a lot more.
Yeah, I like the projection here for Drew Aller. Drew Aller got really unlucky with some of the interceptions last year. He had 10 turnover-worthy throws and 8 interceptions. If you include the postseason, you have, I think, did you have? Yeah,
Mine is
I think
just regular season,
yeah,
but yeah.
regular season. So, but yeah, I think that get a little bit luckier with those throws, and then also Drew Aller, he increased his average depth per target by a full yard last year. First year it was 8, last year it was 9.1. That's a huge step for a quarterback. So Drew Aller, as much as we are saying we want to see him throw the ball down the field more to some of his receivers, he did make that increase last year. So he's going to have that opportunity to make it again this year. And I think that completion percentage could definitely still be on the rise. 71% might be a little high for me, but I can definitely see the projection of getting better with better wide receivers. To me, a big factor is the tight ends, right? If Tyler Warren was coming back, I probably would have put it at a 4 for them. But the fact that you don't have Tyler Warren, Luke Reynolds should be really good, but it's another one. We have to see it, right? We have to see what it looks like. So for now, wide receiver factor a 3, but I could definitely see them being a 4 by season's end.
They have a potential for 4 for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. A lot of good stuff here, guys. Let's go to the next one. Meadows says Buckeyes. So I'll bring up the Buckeyes here. And we're gonna start doing more of this, guys. So if you are somebody that you want your teams talked about first, we're gonna try to start doing more of this where you interact in the chat, you let us know your teams and stuff like that. We'll kind of give you priority a little bit. We're still gonna talk about every team, but kind of give you all priority a little bit since you're taking the time chatting here with us. All right, Jeff,
All right.
Buckeyes.
So you could see, Julian saying definitely most insiders really believe he will be the starter. He comes in ranked 3rd projected 2025 passing stats. They're the only one, like I mentioned earlier, with a 5 rated elite wide receiver core. We all know about Jeremiah Smith, but there's many other good receivers in the fold. And then they added the transfer Max Clare from Purdue, which is a big deal. I mean, the comp, relatively speaking, is 2021 CJ Stroud. That was his first year starting. Stroud was a high 4-star recruit. Remember, Sayin actually is a higher rated recruit than Stroud was. But I also looked at Will Howard's stats as well. First year starting quarterback, though, is harder. Usually you're going to see a higher number of interceptions. CJ's stats were just off the charts. I mentioned earlier, 38 TDs and only 5 interceptions as a first-year starter is just crazy. So in general, I kind of lowered some things by 10% for Sayin. So, for example, completion percentage, Stroud was 70.7 in his first year starting. I just can't go there. So I lowered it by 10%. That's why Sayin came in at about 64% completion rate. If you use the same average yards per completion that Will Howard had last year, because it's still a Ryan Day offense. I know they have a different play caller, but I think that's safe to assume similar types of passes with, going deep to that good wide receiver core, but then leveraging that shorter throws to the tight ends. It comes up with 3,150 yards passing. I believe that's 2nd in the Big Ten, it will turn out to be. So still very high. And I had to lower, this is still super high. 33 TVs for Julian Sayin. As a first-year starter, some might think that's kind of crazy, but, another thing I didn't mention, Ohio State's offensive line is supposed to be really solid. They don't have superstars, but it's they retained some key players from last year that were playing with great chemistry in that playoff run. And then 8 interceptions. So Again, CJ Stroud at 5 in his first year starting. I think 8 is kind of reasonable. Wouldn't be surprised if maybe it was a little bit higher. But, Sain is talented, but this is taking advantage of all the things Ohio State has. He's taking over a Lamborghini here, right? So even though he's a first-year starter, that's why I have him as the third best statistically passing quarterback in the Big Ten. The NFL passer rating would come in at a 107. And again, CJ Stroud had a 128 his first year. And I wanted to be reasonable here with how high that would go. And I think this is doable for Julian Sain.
Yeah, I agree. I'm interested to see what the running game looks like for Ohio State. Are they gonna have that running game that kind of helped Will Howard be as efficient as he was, especially with his completion percentage and stuff like that? If they have another really good running game, that'll be really helpful. But I mean, it doesn't matter who they trot out there. It's not gonna be Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson level of running game. It's just those guys were too good. It's the same thing I say with Michigan isn't gonna have the same D line that they had last year. Those guys were just too good. Maybe by the end of the year, guys develop and get better, but definitely not to start the year. So we'll see there. Okay, Jeff, we got a question from Trojan Fight. He said, "Can you explain the wide receiver factor rating in chart is high number better wide receivers?" So this was just tiers that me and Jeff kind of made. We just kind of went through and said, who has the best wide receiver cores in the Big Ten, and we obviously gave Ohio State a 5. Other ones that kind of have some transfers in it, but it looks good, we gave 3 because that's kind of neutral, right? We don't want to say it's going to be amazing because, average. We don't want to say it's going to be amazing because we don't know yet, but we feel good about it. So, just to play it safe, say average. A team like Iowa, I put them at 2 because there's a lot of hype there for those guys and the experience and stuff like that. I'm not going to put them at a 3 yet because I haven't seen it. And then you had other teams with like returning players like USC, Indiana, stuff like that at 4. I mean, you have Elijah Surratt and what's the other guy at Indiana? Him coming back, and Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, those guys coming back. So there could have been probably a couple other 5s, but just to give Ohio State some of the respect.
Actually, no, there's only one that deserved a 5.
Okay.
I'm going to but Trojan, just so you know, like USC is a 4, which means you've got really very good wide receivers is the way to look at it. I just put 5 as elite, and I save the term elite for very few. And so Ohio State is the only one with a 5 there.
Like Oregon last year would have had a 5.
Probably so. Yeah. It helps to have a good tight end as well, but yeah.
Sure. Well, since we brought up Trojan Fight, let's go ahead and do USC here. He was next on my list.
Yeah.
So
Jaden Maeva, so his comp is really 2024 Miller Moss and Maeva, who combined for about 63% completion rate. So Maeva had it about the same. That's what a Trojan quarterback does, I think. And he's still a very young quarterback. And by the way, you can see he came in 9th out of 18. So he's about in the middle. But 64% completion rate. A lot of yards, 3,000, almost 3,500 yards. So, USC, many fans, and I listened to the podcast for USC, they really thought last year they should have ran the ball more. But Lincoln Riley just loves the pass. So I have them with 450 pass attempts. That's going to be most in the Big Ten. And then that passing yardage of 3,100, I think also leads. That's going to end up being second in the Big Ten. They average almost 11 yards per catch. I kept that the same and then applied that to the number of completions for Maeva to get to the 3,150. And then, as we talked about earlier, very talented, made some great throws, but maybe over aggressive in his throws. So I had the kind of like a 2-for-1 TD to INT ratio because USC throws the ball so much, a high number of touchdowns at 25. But then, I must have lowered the interceptions to 11 for him. So I counted experienced a little bit to improve his ratio there a little bit. I'm almost surprised from the numbers that it didn't come in higher than about a 93 rating on the NFL passer rating, but that's what it did. So expect a lot of yards. Not super high completion rate because when you're throwing that much, I think, and throwing riskier throws, but he ends up finishing in the middle of the pack when it comes to overall passer rating for us.
Yeah, I like it. For me, like I said earlier, the big number is going to be that interceptions. 11 interceptions is a lot, but you also look at the attempts you have here at 450. I mean, that's just so much to put on one guy. If USC has a running game this year, I don't think he'll have quite as many yards and stuff, but those interceptions will definitely go down. And I don't think they need to go after a huge running game. Jada Mayava had a good year at UNLV. Did some really nice things last year when he came in, but obviously struggled with turning the ball over. Took some unnecessary risks at times, but they were also in a lot of close games, and that's what you do in close games. You take risks. I would rather have a guy who's willing to take the risks than a guy who isn't. And so, Jada Mayava, I'm kind of there with you, Jeff. I think right now he's kind of middle of the pack, but I could see him having a really really good year and being up near top five, if not top five.
Yeah. If
And
he gets the completion percentage up, all these everything's going to be much higher. Uh,
mhm.
and I was just looking at this. I mean, USC threw the ball almost 500 times last year. So that 450 is actually about 50 less than last year. I think that also speaks to how USC was behind or in close
They just
games.
wouldn't run the ball with Woody Marks, man.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't get it. Like you're having quarterback issues, run the ball, but and that
Especially,
offensive line was better at running the
yeah,
ball than they were at pass protection. It was crazy.
yeah. When they were up, they blew 4 leads in the fourth quarter, and
Yes,
that's
yes.
especially why the podcasters are like, run the ball, run the clock.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, Trojan fights with us is based on those numbers. I do hope USC runs
yeah,
the ball more. I hope so too. I hope
it's a
so
little
too.
crazy.
All right, let's see who we got next. Okay, I'm excited to talk about this guy. I'm a Washington fan, and the fan base thinks Damon Williams has Heisman potential. Is that delusional? I can't tell. Well, I'll tell you, I do see a lot of really good things about Damon Williams. Yay, I don't know if Heisman, is something to expect. Could it happen? Sure, he has that kind of game, but it's also going to be his first year starting. I don't want to put too much pressure on him. And Jeff, your numbers here do not allude to a Heisman season.
So here's the thing that's important, Alex, and I don't know if you were on to start. This is all passing stats. So your multidimensional, more quarterbacks that are more mobile are going to be understated in these rankings here. So Damon Williams Jr. comes in only 12th out of 18. And you're probably thinking, oh my God, that's way under. Again, none of his running ability are factored in here. So we acknowledge that. This is just based on passing. So we have to remember, he is still a very young quarterback. I am going to go off of Will Rogers' data. He played 11 games last year, but it should be the other thing to factor in here is Dylan Raiola and Aiden Childs, who are very highly ranked quarterbacks last year and what they did. Raiola, as high as he was ranked, he had 12 touchdowns and 10 interceptions last year. Awful, right? Aiden Childs, 13 TDs, 11 interceptions. When you get first year starters like that, it can happen like that. So I actually have Damon Williams stats better than those two, which, and remember, Iola was a 5-star and some had him as the number one quarterback. So 15 TDs and 10 interceptions is not that bad. It's just going to not equate to a great rating, unfortunately. The other thing is you have a strong running game in Jonah Coleman. And then with the young quarterback, I see them leveraging quarterback runs a lot and being conservative. And that's just going to bring down the yardage overall as well. So only 2,200 yards for Damon Williams, but a 65% completion rate is actually pretty damn good. Let's see what Washington had last year. Will Rogers completed 70%, but he was very experienced. So Damon Williams just being 5% below that as far as completion percentage, I think is reasonable. So again, number 12 might feel disappointing, not factoring in his running ability, which we know is going to be a huge thing for Washington this year. JR, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I really like Damon Williams. I think that Damon Williams, he's gonna he I don't want to say he's going to struggle. I don't. Struggle is not the right word. He's just going to have to get used to being the guy. You know, Damon Williams came in last season during a lot of kind of mop up duty. He also came in at times during the games too. I don't want to say he was just the backup. He came in at times too and had some packages and stuff they used him for, which that was really good. And I think that was a great move by Jed Fish to get him ready for this season. But at the same time, you know, it's still being the main guy, right? Being the main guy is tough, and it takes a lot to get used to. So he only had two turnover worthy passes all season outside of the bowl game, and that was in about 70 attempts. So I mean, he doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot. Again, it was during mop up duty, so maybe if he's trying to scramble and be a playmaker and make a big play, I could see something like that happening, kind of like Jada Maava last year. But as long as he takes care of the football, makes good decisions, and he is able to use his feet to get out of bad situations, I think Damon Williams got a really, really good season next year.
And he's one I would put as a potential to do significantly better than that. But again, when I look at those other young quarterbacks like Childs and Raiola, I just can't get too aggressive here on projecting him, much higher than this. But
For sure.
talent wise, and based on what he did last year, he had a 77% completion percentage last year with only 73 passes. I do think the packages that he gets, he only had to know when I go in, I'm going to be running these 5 plays basically, right? That's a lot easier than starting the whole game and then having the game plan adjust based on what the opponent is doing. Your numbers are going to come down when you're the full-time starter like that. That's why small sample size like that is a little bit deceiving.
Very good. Blue Wolverine coming in, gifting 10 Big Ten Huddle football memberships. Blue Wolverine, we appreciate you. You are the best. Thank you for supporting the show the many ways that you do. Very much appreciate it. Love our Blue Wolverine and Doreen when she's here. We started a little bit later tonight though, and Doreen she normally gets herself in bed, so I'm not sure if Doreen would be able to make it tonight. But Blue Wolverine, we appreciate it. So all right. Yes, Alex, you're welcome. Oh, one more question from Alex. He said, "How many overall TDs do you think he'll run in? That may make 15 and 10 look better. Initially, 15 and 10 seems low to me. Yeah, I think he'll rely on his legs a lot in the red zone, and I think that will kind of elevate those rushing touchdown numbers. I don't think you had a formula for rushing
Well,
touchdowns, did
so
you?
yeah, I mean it's a great point. The 15 TDs for Demond is just passing TDs, right? That's all that this is. We are not evaluate running, so there is no doubt he's going to have a significant number of rushing TDs. But this
Mm-hmm.
is just NFL passer rating, and then we're saying 15 passing touchdowns.
Yeah, and he had two running TDs last season in what looks like 63 attempts. So, yeah, if he runs the ball a good amount of times and it holds to
Yeah,
what a similar was to last year, yeah, he'll have a good number,
I mean, he
6 to
had
8.
he had 282 yards rushing last year and very limited. So it tells you he could be like a 500-yard rusher next year. I mean,
Yeah,
and
370
again,
if you include the bowl game. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, um, but
All
this
right.
is this is rating him as a passer.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. Mish is asking for UCLA. I was excited about this one too. All right. Nico Iamali Ava. Let's see. Down here at the bottom. All right, take it away, Jeff.
Yeah, so comes in as eighth in the Big Ten with a 95 ranking. We had UCLA's wide receiver core as 1. So that means on the poor end of things, Tennessee, safe to say, would have a better receiver core. So that's factoring in, these projections for sure for Nico. The comp is himself in 2024 and then Ethan Garbers. So the prior UCLA quarterback who had a 65% completion rate. So I had Nico with about a 64% completion rate. That's the I basically held his completion rate as the same he had at Tennessee. He had 63.6, and I think he's more experienced, but it's a worse receiver core. So holding that steady, I think makes sense. Um, we use the same yards per completion. So Garber's had an 11.6 yards per completion. I used that same figure for his 235 estimated completed passes, and that's how we got about 2,700 yards in passing offense. And then as far as TD to interception ratio for Tennessee last year, he had 19 TDs and 5 interceptions. So I'm holding those 19 TDs steady. Again, they're not going up because the receiver core is not like one of the better ones, I believe. And then a couple more interceptions again, where he might have to throw a little bit riskier throws potentially. UCLA is going to be behind more than Tennessee was. And so that's going to cause you to take a little more chances throwing the ball. But I expect a good year. I mean, number 8 for UCLA, given how their offense was really weak last year. So this might be hard to get to, actually. But I think it feels reasonable based on the history of what he had at Tennessee. JR, what do you think?
Yeah, you kept mentioning receivers, which I think is important to mention. I also think, you're coming from the SEC to the Big Ten, and it's no secret in the Big Ten, it's grinded out more, more run game stuff. And while UCLA didn't have much of a run game for good parts of the year last year, I think they're gonna focus in on that more this year. As long as Tino Sunseri as the offensive coordinator can get that right. And also too, I think Tino Sunseri is going to do a really good job with Nico. I mean, he did a really good job with Curtis Rourke. He did a really good job with McLeod at James Madison. So he's got a really good track record. We want to talk about how Kirk Cinetti has a good track record with quarterback. He's had Tino Sunseri for a lot of those years, and I'm not saying Tino Sunseri is the reason, and like Kirk Cinetti's not going to be able to work with quarterbacks anymore. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that Tino Sunseri, he learned from Kirk Cinetti. He obviously knows what he's doing, and I think that Nico will make improvements this year, but it might not be as evident statistically because of the wide receivers and because of the switch from the SEC to the Big Ten.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to Pit Snipe Husker says, "Hello, Big Teners. You know what, Pit Snipe? You weren't here when I said to do the team, so we'll just go ahead. We'll go with your guy, Dylan Raiola, next. Let's see, down here. Really excited to see what Dylan Raiola does next season. What do you got, Jeff?
So I have him as the 5th best passing quarterback in the Big Ten projected. Yep. I am a big believer first year starting quarterbacks struggle, especially if they're freshmen. If they're freshmen, look out. Grab your butts, as they say in Jurassic Park. But someone like the jump from 1 to 2 is the biggest jump a quarterback has as far as things slowing down for them. So really, his ranking is really himself. I actually also looked at JJ McCarthy. So JJ McCarthy, as a first year starter, I looked at the stats jumping from first to second year. Like his rating went up by about 15 percentage points. So Raiola here with 100 rating. What was his last year? Yeah, 84.7 was his rating last year. And so if he has the jump that a JJ McCarthy had, 15 points, that's how I got to the 100, right? And then I kind of backed into some of the other numbers. So I see his TDs, which were 12, and interceptions is 10, jumping to 20 TDs and only 8 interceptions. Another factor here, though, is the wide receiver core for Nebraska being much better. We actually put them as a 4, which is very good. So relative to the Big Ten, they're look at it as 4 out of 5, right? Very good receiver. So that's going to help Raiola. Being under the same system for the second year in a row is a big deal. I assume the same yards per catch as the prior year, so 10.3 yards per catch. And then his completion percentage definitely goes up. So that's where you see a big increase. So 68% completion percentage, whereas last year it was 66. So he actually wasn't bad last year. Completion percentage only goes up another 2%. The biggest difference is just that better TD to INT ratio dramatically improves. And that's why you're going to see his passer rating go up by about 15 points. So big jump for Dylan Raiola this year as the number 5 quarterback projected in the Big Ten for passing.
Yeah,
What
I
do you
agree on the jump for Raiola. Offensive coordinator's problems last year, which it was kind of surprising. He had some of his best games when he had Satterfield as the offensive coordinator, but he there at the end of the season once what's his name? I'm blanking on the
Yeah,
offensive coordinator for Nebraska now, but hey, Holgerson, Dana Holgerson.
Holgerson, yeah.
Once he took over, you could just tell the offense looked better overall. Maybe Rayola didn't always have the better stats because he was playing tougher competition, but I agree. These quarterbacks they kind of have a first year where maybe things aren't as good. Really projecting a big jump here for Nebraska. I'm always skeptical to project too much of a jump. I've drank the Nebraska Kool-Aid before, and it doesn't taste so good when when I when I have to come back down to earth. So I'm hoping you're right, Jeff. I want to see it for Nebraska. They get disrespected a lot, and I get it. Since 2020, they have the least amount of wins in the Big Ten. That's just sad for that program. But Matt Rule, I think, even though he kind of opens his mouth a little bit, he's a good coach. He knows what he's doing, and I think Dylan Raiola has the potential to take that big jump, especially with better wide receiver play this year. Dane Key, those guys. It's either a three or a four on the wide receiver factor, one of those two. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's hit Indiana. We got the Indiana fans wanting to hear about Indiana. So let's see, Fernando Mendoza. And there he is, number 2.
Number 2. By the way, I am an Indiana grad.
But you're
So,
not biased, Jeff. You're not biased.
well, and I am one of the ones to say people shouldn't complain too much of, oh, we're preseason 23. That's disrespectful. We only did it 1 year. I don't blame people. They need to see it more than 1 year. Indiana is not under Tom Allen. Remember, we went 6-1 that COVID year, entered the season ranked number 13, and that year we finished 2-10. And I know this is a different team, but Indiana just has a history of not maintaining success. It is what it is. So, but the good news is, sorry for that little rant. Mendoza projected number 2 quarterback in the Big Ten. So his comp is Curtis Rourke, who was the number 1 rated passing quarterback last year, as those who were on the pod to start when we showed the top 5 last year. Now, Curtis Rourke did have more overall experience. I know Mendoza started for Cal last year, but Rourke was a multi-year starter at Ohio. So that's something to factor in. But similar receivers, right? Offensive line as well, a lot of returners, some good transfers coming in. So that's why we're saying a 4 as the factor for the wide receivers for Indiana. So Elijah Surratt, many have him as an all Big Ten performer. So that bodes well for them. I kept the same completion percentage as Rourke had. So really that 68.9%, which is really good, was what Rourke has. And why not, right? It's going to be the same offensive system. Now, maybe the one difference, Rourke had a 29 TD to 5 interception ratio. That is like awesome, right? That's probably elite. I just can't go there. So I'm downgrading his TDs by 6, but it's still really good. And INTs up to 8 from 5. That's still a 3-to-1 TD to INT ratio, which is still excellent. And that all equates to 112 passer rating, and it's good for second in the Big Ten. So he's right up there with all Big Ten performance. And if he does that, Indiana is going to have a very good year. I'm not sure if they're going to go 11-1, but they'll be in a very nice bowl if Mendoza performs like these projections show.
Yeah,
JR.
I'm a big Mendoza fan for next year. Felt like he got some good experience at Cal. I do have some concern about him taking sacks and stuff like that. But I'm confident that Signetti's going to get that O line healthy enough for next year, as long as they can stay healthy throughout the season. I know they got more depth than they did last year, but still, I mean, you're entering in the season with two guys that had crucial injuries at the end of last season. So just want to make sure those guys are back and healthy. But yeah, just really good stuff for Indiana last year. I am very interested to see what it is like without Tino Sinceri. Tino Sinceri was just he was such a good quarterback coach. So what does that look like without him? Still have confidence in Signetti. He's had good quarterback play basically everywhere he's went, with or without Sinceri. This is just a different animal. This is a different animal. The Big Ten. It's a different schedule this year. So Signetti, no doubt,
Tough
is
to
going to
schedule.
field
Yeah,
another really good team. We'll just have to see what it looks. And the running game too. Roman Hemby and those guys. I think they have more depth at the running back position this year, even than last year. Last year they had good depth. But can Roman Hemby be that guy? I think he can. We're just gonna have to see it because we saw what it looked like when they didn't have a running game against Michigan. That was really really hard on Rourke. So yeah.
for sure.
Okay, let's see. What do we got next? Mish says Purdue for the memes, and then this is the last one we have. So unless anybody else has one, then we'll just kind of reveal the rest and kind of talk about him a little bit. So Purdue for the memes here. Let's see, where do we got him? 17th. Ooh, ouch. Ryan Brownie.
Yeah, so I do have Ryan Brown as the starter. You know, there's not a clear leader here, so that Washington State has a transfer. Chuba Evans, Malaki Singleton's a four-star recruit, but I'm not big on. And I know he played a little bit at Arkansas, but going to go with Brown. Really hard to have a comp for him. New because of new coaching staff, so very hard to go by previous Purdue, and then losing Max Clare as well. So just a tough one here. So I guess I used really Hudson Card from last year as the best I could. Ryan Brown only had 76 passes, like we mentioned, 57% completion rate on those 76 passes from last year, but that's just not a big enough body of work to rate too much. So Hudson's Card threw for about 58%. So that's what I had Ryan Brown at. That's where I got that from. I used a similar yard per catch for him to come up with the 2,200 yards. And then 14 and 8 for TD to INT. Last year, Purdue, I think overall had a 13 TDs and 9 interceptions. So I'm improving the TDs by 1 and I'm lowering the interception by 1 compared to last year's Purdue. So, it does come with an 83 ranking, which puts him second to last in the Big Ten. The upside is there, though. The unknown of a new coach, bringing over transfers from UNLV. I would think this would be as bad as it could get. So I would see more upside than downside because 83 is already pretty low to start with. So yeah, not going to be too exciting to see for Purdue fans, but year one is like the free pass year anyway. So the key thing is just to see them play hard and look like a well-coached team. That's what you're looking for Purdue. Those two things.
Yeah. Yep. And the wide receivers are an unknown. The offensive line
Yeah.
is an unknown. That it's just so hard to predict Purdue. So, all right. Let's bring up. Philip says Oregon. So let's bring up Oregon. Jeff, I have seen the Oregon numbers. I have a few disagreements with Oregon, but I'll let you take the floor first once we bring them up, and then maybe we can maybe banter a bit back and forth. You have Dante Moore 6. Go ahead.
Yeah, them 6. This is a hard one. I mean, you had Bo Nix, of course, with all the ton of experience he had, and he'd exploded there. You had Dylan Gabriel with all the experience he had, and he just literally exploded. And then you're bringing in Dante Moore. Now, he did have the UCLA experience, but those other quarterbacks had multi-years of Division I experience, so that made it hard. So, I did use Gabriel and Nix as like a starting point, but kind of downgraded. Moore also at UCLA, his completion percentage was only 53%. So that's like pretty scary, although probably not that surprising from such a young quarterback. He also had 11 TDs and 9 interceptions. But this is one where you say he's being brought into a system at Oregon, which should allow all his stats to be significantly better because he's got a talented offensive line. He's got a good wide receiver core, a very good wide receiver core. We rank them as a 4. They might be the second best to Ohio State, in fact, as far as wide receivers. And so, completing 67% of his passes, that's quite a leap from his 53% for UCLA, but it's within Oregon. Again, 2,600 passing yards. I do think because it's a younger quarterback and Oregon has good running backs, despite the good wide receiver core, I don't see them throwing the ball around as much as they did under their 2 prior quarterbacks. So that's going to kind of downgrade these stats some. So, and coming at number 6, there's no shame in that. So I'm actually real interested to see what JR is thinking, if I'm overdoing this or underdoing this for Dante Moore. Tell me, JR.
Yeah, so my thing with Dante Moore is I think the interceptions are too high, and I think the completion percentage is too low. The average depth of target of Oregon quarterbacks the past 3 years has been on average like less than 7, which is just really, really low. And I'm not knocking that. That's just how their offense is. I do think it inflates numbers a little bit, but at the same time, you do that because you have good playmakers at wide receiver. And Terrence Ferguson was a yards after catch, merchant. So that was, and I'm not trying to say merchant in a bad way. He's just really, really good at it. So I'm not trying to say it's a bad thing, but I do think, I mean, unless Dante Moore just completely reverts back to what he was at UCLA and makes bad decisions and stuff like that, which he was a freshman then, right? If we're projecting a good jump for Dylan Raiola and a good jump for Imaliava, I agree. He's probably right there in between those guys, if not up there. So yeah, I mean, but again, I'm not knocking Oregon for the low average depth of target because you had playmakers on the outside. Yes, Tez Johnson, Terrence Ferguson, just get the ball in those guys' hands and let them go. But I don't. I mean, with DeCorian Moore, Evan Stewart, guys like that, Kenyon Sadiq should be really good this season as well. I don't know if I see Oregon going away from some of that kind of shallow, dump the ball off type of stuff that we saw from Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel. But that's just me. We'll see what happens.
I mean, to kind of support my number, Dylan Gabriel, as good as he was last year, he had 24 touchdown passes. I have more with 4 less. To me, that's not
Yeah,
that
no,
much
I'm good with
less.
the touchdown passes.
Yeah,
Touchdown
yeah.
passes are good, and I think
Okay.
Dante Moore will probably run, and get his touchdowns up that way.
And
My thing
yeah,
is the interceptions and the completion percentage.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then Dylan Gabriel, 73% complete, which was, I think that led the Big Ten. Or yeah, that was tied for the lead. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, you could argue maybe a little more upside than this, but you know, first time starting there, 6th in the Big Ten, that's
yeah,
still damn good. And they'll have a really good season if he does that. Really good.
for sure. Really good season. Yeah, I'm not trying to say it's not a good season.
Yeah.
Really good season still. Yeah, those are just my only critiques. So, it'd be boring if we just agreed on everything, right, Jeff? We gotta
Oh,
we gotta
oh,
spice
that's
it up a
yeah.
little bit. All right. Okay, I think that's just about everybody that people mentioned. So, Jeff, tell you what, I'll bring them up one at a time, and we'll just be really quick on the rest
Yeah.
of them. And then if anybody in the chat has any
Bring up
comments, we
Michigan
can do those.
State because they're the highest one here. They are interesting. I'll try to hit these. Aiden Childs. Um, so again, looking at JJ McCarthy, just as far as the leap he made. So Aiden Childs definitely going to, TDs, 13, 11 interceptions last year. So 5 more TDs, 2 less interceptions. So I think that's pretty reasonable. Childs, surprisingly, 59% completion rate last year. That's not that bad. So going up to 65, I think is very reasonable. So I think that these are a pretty reasonable leap for him. About a 15% or 15-point rating increase in his passer rating. That's what JJ McCarthy did. And I do think it's reasonable because he might have the second best wide receiver in the Big Ten in that Marsh kid, right? That's another factor. If we're saying they have a 4 out of 5 as far as a wide receiver core, I think that's reasonable. So let's go down to 10, which would be the next one that's not listed on here. This one I might feel the least comfortable with, which would be a good one to cover, actually.
Which one's 10?
Mark Gronowski, Iowa.
Okay.
Sorry,
Iowa.
Iowa. Yeah, and he is 10 because one thing, though, they're all tight here, though. I mean, the difference between him 10 and just, a couple more interceptions, and he's probably 14, so that's one thing I wanted to say. But, his numbers at San Diego or South Dakota State, 61% completion rate. So that's why I have 60% here. 15, he had 23 TDs and 7 INTs. So I think 15 TDs would be great for Iowa. And then 8 interceptions. I think I had a stat here. Iowa has an average 1 passing touchdown per game, which is basically 12 for the season since 2019. So if he had 15, that would be the most regular season touchdown passes since 2019. That would be a hell of a great year. And it is probably the best I had to go back to CJ Beathard to find a decent Iowa quarterback from 2015. That was kind of my comp for Mark Gronowski
Hey,
all the way
CJ
back
Beathard.
10
Hey,
years ago.
NFL quarterback right there, CJ
Yeah,
Beathard.
third round to San Francisco.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
anyway,
did you know? Did you know, Jeff? I went on Jeffrey the Greek's podcast, which, by the way, go check it out. Eyes on Big podcast. Jeffrey the Greek and their guys. He does a great job over there. He told me on the podcast Iowa has a record for the most touchdown passes in a game in program history, 7. Do you know what the most touchdown passes in a game in program history for Ohio State is?
8 or 9.
6.
Oh,
6.
6. Okay.
Yeah. So Iowa with more more in one game. Yeah, Jeffrey was really proud of that. I do want to back it up to Aiden Childs really fast. I
Yeah.
do think that Aiden Childs, I saw some comments about interceptions. Philip saying not enough interceptions for Childs. I do think Childs, I saw improvement from at the end of the year. Now, can he sustain that improvement? We'll see. But against his last 3 games at Illinois, he was 23 for 40, 256 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Against Purdue, 15 for 31, not a great completion percentage there, but 159 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And then against Rutgers, 13 for 23, 150 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. And in those last 3 games, 0 turnover worthy throws as well for Aiden Childs. So if that really was an improvement, I mean, maybe it was just an anomaly of 3 games, but if that really was an improvement, I can see the interceptions coming down. And obviously that offensive line has to get better as well. They didn't have great pass protection at times last year, but if improvement can stick, it'll be huge for him. But
So
I would see this. I see the skepticism there, Philip. I get it.
but to support what you're saying, though, JR, he only had 11 interceptions all of last year. So I'm saying he's having 2 less, right? And he threw 324 times last year, and I have him throwing only 25 more times, basically 2 more per game. So, Philip, you might be right, but just devil's advocate here, I really think his early struggles, and it's when he threw the interceptions, made everyone think his interceptions were way more than they were. It's the quality, if you will, of interceptions, JR, was so detrimental to their team winning. It made it feel like it was even worse, I think. I don't know, just my thought.
Yeah,
But
and it definitely was. Boston College, he had 3, he had 2 early on in the season. I mean, those first 4 games, he had
yeah,
7
and,
interceptions. Or
and
the first 8
that
games, he had
set
9
the like
interceptions.
yeah, like first impressions, right? Like
Yep.
people can't get that out of their head. But
Yeah.
yeah, he has to take care of the ball like all good quarterbacks. Well, with 13 is Wisconsin. Go Wisconsin. Billy Edwards Jr. But this one's a tough one. Take a Billy Edwards Jr. good talent and throw him into Wisconsin with a new offensive coordinator, the Kansas guy. I mean, they're
New left
struggling, tough
tackle.
schedule. I mean, good
New left
Lord.
tackle, yeah.
Just a tough. So I had him 13th. Let's see who I comped on here. Yeah, I kind of compared him to himself, and then Braden Locke, who only at 55% completion rate, Braden Locke for the Badgers. 13 TDs and 10 INTs. So Edwards, if he could throw 17 TDs and 8 INTs, would be a huge improvement over Locke's ratio from the prior year. So that would be big. And then 2,300 passing yards for him. Let's see what Locke did. Yeah, under 2,000, so 1,900 or so. So really, Locke was 76 passer rating last year. I have Edwards with an 88, and he at Maryland last year was 87. So I think, Wisconsin with and probably below average wide receiver core, this feels reasonable to me. 13 out of 18 quarterbacks in the Big Ten for him.
Yeah, Wisconsin feels good about their wide receivers. They got that Jaden Ballard from Ohio State, Trek Kukumunga as well. I mean, they got some good guys. I don't know how to feel about it all season long yet. I mean, Jaden
Yeah.
Ballard, he was a career backup at Ohio State, and he's going to come in, and it sounds like he's one of their best, if not the best, wide receiver there. Maybe he was just that good, and he just never got on the field at Ohio State because everybody was that good in front of him. So maybe we're sleeping on their wide receivers a little bit, but yeah. So okay, before the next one, I do want to address this comment really fast, very quickly. Bobby Mack says 4 people are tied with 6 touchdowns in a game. I believe he's talking about for Ohio State. Yeah, it's 5. I think Bobby Mack. I think it's C.J. Stroud, J.T. Barrett, um, what's his name? Dwayne Haskins and C.J. Stroud, J.T. Barrett, Dwayne Haskins, and who's the other one? Justin Fields. The 5th one, Kenny Guyton, the backup. I think it was like
Wow.
against Oregon State or Temple or something like that. He got his one start of his career, and he just went insane and had 6 touchdown passes. Like I said, it was like against Temple or something like that. So yeah, Bobby Mack, you're right. They definitely got the numbers there.
What
I just thought it was a funny stat that Iowa has that record over Ohio State. It's
was the
funny. Yeah, I'm
CJ
right there with
Stroud
you.
one, the game Michigan State at Ohio State when it was
I
49 to
think he
nothing at
has
half?
2. I think he has 2. Didn't he have 6
Because
against Utah in the
I
Rose
was
Bowl?
at that game,
And
by the way, with my 2 boys, the
yeah,
Michigan State Ohio State game. Yeah.
yeah, and he had 6 against Michigan State and 6 against Utah, I think. And then Justin Fields had 2 or 3. Dwayne Haskins had 2, and then yeah. So all right, let's
All
move
right.
on.
Go
Got
next. Northwestern. They're number 14. Preston Stone. Again, hard to project. I kind of looked at Ben Bryant's the first season under David Brown. Ben Bryant when Northwestern went 7-5. So I kind of used that as a comp as best I could. He had 11 TDs and 6 interceptions that year. Preston Stone, I guess 2 years ago for SMU, 28 touchdowns and 6 INTs. So this guy's got the capability, but SMU, not playing great defenses. Northwestern's playing much better defenses. So this is a hard projection, JR. I mean, really hard. I had 18 TDs, 9 interceptions. That'd be a damn good year for him. Fairly low completion percent, 62%. So an 88 rating for 14th in the Big Ten. But
yeah, I would have
and a weak receiver core. So this one's
yeah.
just hard to.
I have a really hard time with Northwestern next year. You saw Mike Wright didn't do so hot. He transferred. I think he went to like FCS or really low FBS, one of the two. And then Jack Lausch last year. I mean, he did everything he could, but Jack Lausch, he's just not a starting
Yeah.
Big Ten caliber cornerback. Good mobile guy, but yeah, just not Big Ten starter caliber. So
Yeah.
all right, what do we got next?
So we're rounding out here. So 15 or Michigan, Bryce Underwood. Again, tough one. People are going to think I'm a Michigan hater, but just remember Raiola, 5-star. He had 12 TDs and 10 interceptions. So I actually have Underwood with 14 TDs, better than Raiola, and only 10 interceptions. A true freshman. Defensive coordinators are going to be throwing so many blitzes at them. It's going to make your head spin. So it's just hard as a true freshman. I don't care how talented you are. You're just not going to have huge numbers. I expect they're going to rely on the running game and rely on his athletic ability and size to run as well. And so passing stats are just not going to be all that impressive. So this probably undervalues Underwood just because he's ability to run, but I have him as the 15th best quarterback with an 87 ranking. Again, Riolo did 84.7, so can't say I'm a Michigan hater. He's actually better than Raiola from last year with a receiver core that probably is worse than Nebraska's from last year.
Yeah,
They're going to come after me. Hey, this isn't projecting wins, though. I mean, so that's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah. I watched a video the other day of a Michigan fan comparing Donovan McCauley to Calvin Johnson, and if that happens, sure, yeah, they're a much better receiver core. But yeah, I don't see that happening. So Donovan McCauley's got a good talent, but I would be concerned about a
I'm an
guy that
Indiana
left
fan.
it.
I've seen McCauley play quarterback for Indiana and wide receiver.
Yeah,
He's a good wide receiver. That's a horrible comparison, though. Give me a break.
yeah. I agree with you. I agree. So, yeah, we'll see what Michigan does next year. I mean, Bryce Underwood is definitely going to be an upgrade in talent over anybody they had last year, but yeah, PK is exactly right. You're relying on the defense, and Bryce Underwood, 10 interceptions, that won't get it done next year, but if he's able to drop those interceptions and just be a playmaker and keep the chains moving and stuff like that, that's going to be huge for them. So,
Yeah.
all right, what do you say if I just release the last three
two.
here?
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's the last two, right? It's 16. Maryland is 16th.
Oh, okay.
We're not even sure who the starter is. I had Justin Martin as the starter, but who knows? Lord, who knows? And then Drake Lindsey have Minnesota, and many do have Minnesota as like the worst quarterback situation, but not saying they're going to have a bad year. I mean, PJ Fleck, he'll manage it, right? I have him as 55% completion rate for Minnesota, and then 14 TDs, 9 interceptions. I mean, there wasn't a good comp here because this guy doesn't have much experience, and Brosmer had all kinds of experience last year, 4 years playing for New Hampshire. Max Brosmer went to my high school, by the way, the high school that my kids go to here. So it's pretty cool. Sweet. I sent a text to you, JR, and you didn't return anything. I was in the grocery store last week, and Max was in the store with his girlfriend.
Oh, I didn't see that text. That's awesome.
What a shocker. She's really good looking too. So he was obviously in town before the mini camp started next week.
Yeah.
Because he lives in like the next neighborhood over. So really cool. I hope he makes it.
That's
He's
awesome.
a free agent signing for the Vikings, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be he deserves to make a team. I think he could be a good backup in the league. If things swing right for him. So, yeah, I'm really interested to see Drake Lindsey next season. I don't think he's going to have to do too much. I think he's going to have Darius Taylor doing a lot for him, and Coy Parrish will definitely help on the outside there. So I've seen the projections of worst quarterback situation in the Big Ten, stuff like that. I don't know if I buy that with PJ Fleck. I think they could have went out and got a better transfer quarterback if they didn't believe in Drake Lindsey. I at first I thought Zach Pyron might start over him just because of him being experienced, but Zach Pyron, they were saying he was running third or fourth on the depth chart. So I don't know. Maybe Drake Lindsey just is the guy. It will be his first year starting though, so I agree with you. Like he's gonna have some struggles there, and he's gonna have to get some experience. But with a good running back in Darius Taylor and a playmaker in Coy Parrish with him. I think he could see some success. And then, Maryland, Justin Martin, Malik Washington. We'll see. I saw somebody had Malik Washington in their top 5 Big Ten quarterbacks. Lord help that man. I don't know what in the world he's thinking. Not doubting Malik Washington at all, but when he's in a quarterback battle and you don't even know if he's going to be the starter yet with a guy who was the backup last year at UCLA, he's not top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten. So, all right. Anything else, Jeff? Before we get out of here?
No, that's it. It was an interesting extra trying to find a comp for these folks, but
yeah.
But yeah, I think it bodes pretty well for the Big Ten, though. They've definitely have some new starters to bring in, but some of the new starters are in systems that are proven to generate strong quarterback play, right? So that's the good things. The ones who are under or rated low are the ones who are coming into unproven offensive systems. So this is not a ranking of how good the quarterback is necessarily. It also really factors in what's the program, right? What's the supporting cast like? Um, so pretty fun. So
Mm-hmm.
next week we're going to try to do. We're not going to be able to do a live one. My kids will be in a first swim meet of the year on Thursday night. So I think we're going to try to put out a podcast earlier in the day. But JR, I'm sure you'll be keeping everyone abreast of what the main topic will be and everything. But we do plan to have something next Thursday still.
Yeah, Jeff and I are going to try to record something beforehand, and we'll put it out as like a preview or premiere or something like that, so you all can enjoy that. PSU Jim says, "Is the Big Ten Huddle going to rate other positions?" That's a good idea, Jeff. I don't typically do the like rank returning players at position thing, just because I think it's really difficult to do, but I think with from a data perspective, that would be really interesting. So I'm not saying we're going to go with best offensive tackles or anything like that. Hard to get data on that one, but would be interesting to maybe do a best linebackers or a best wide receivers or something like that. So
It's a good question.
we'll leave it up to Jeff.
I would say I don't know, because it really does depend on what we think are the most. If we think there's other more compelling topics than ranking another position group, we're going to go with the more compelling. But maybe, but I couldn't say yes or no at this point.
Mitch says do running backs, and
That'd
running
be
backs are
the one you
definitely.
could do. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would never do. The running back would be the one that would make the
Yeah.
most sense if we were
You
to do
could
something
probably
like
do
that.
running backs, wide receivers, linebacker, edge rushers, maybe. Can't really do defensive tackles though. There's not enough data on those guys.
I even hate
Um,
doing linemen though, because you could have 4 sacks but cause all kinds of pressure. You just didn't get to the guy.
yep.
Yeah. To me, yeah, I'm not doing linemen.
Yeah. No, I think
It'd
I
be
think
more
at the
like
very
running.
least,
It'd be
running
more,
backs and
yeah,
wide receivers would be cool to do. So,
right. Skill.
uh,
It'd have to be skill position.
Bobby Mack says, "Let's do wide receivers to feed my ego." I like that. PSU Jim
Maybe we
says,
rate the punters. I'll just give
but
Iowa the number one right now.
PSU Jim says O line, but as a unit, we did do O line like returning snaps rankings in an episode. Zach and I did. If you guys didn't see that, we can maybe do it again for an episode, but that would probably be the best data to use on those guys. You could do a little bit of like PFF data stuff, but to me, experience is such a huge thing with the offensive line. So yeah, maybe Zach and I will reference that in a future episode or something. So yeah. All right, Jeff. What? Anything else you want to tell people where they can find you at?
Just follow me on X at Big Jeff's FT Ball, and then I will get back into writing more articles here. I still haven't done it, so I'll let you know whenever I have this topic backed with an article on my website. But yeah, definitely follow us and like us and do all that good stuff.
Yes, we don't get enough likes on our videos. I've noticed that. I go to other people's videos who have similar views to us, and they have like double, triple times as many likes as we have. So like the video, help us out. Would really appreciate it. And subscribe, do all that good stuff. Really trying to gain some more subscribers here in the off season, and tell people about the Big Ten and everything else going on. There's a lot of people out there. Apparently, the SEC is adding a ninth conference game now, and I'd like to say the Big Ten had something to do with that. So congrats, Big Ten. Hey, Bobby Mack, appreciate you. He said he liked it for me. Everybody follow in Bobby Mack's footsteps. Like the video. All right, everybody. We appreciate you being here. Have a good one. See you next time.